I had in my mind. And I think we already covered the teeter, and I think we got some strategy direction on that, and so I'm happy about that. And so that kind of helps us to form the numbers in that area, so that gives us that, at least that priority.
Okay. Any members of the public, we're going to close this out here. Any members of the public want to speak here? Okay, any other comments? Oh, Supervisor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. To Ms. Wyatt, I think that you only got, I would say, just a beginning look at the teeter. Basically, I think you got, from what I heard from it, the direction that it should be a zero impact. In other words, that the general fund will have to contribute to the teeter fund what revenues don't materialize to equal monies going out are the same as monies coming in, right? So that, but to me, that's only that doesn't deal with the $11.7 now million debt. So I think the second part of the discussion is going to be, how does the board want to prioritize how much of that debt we are going to decide we need to pay on? I don't think we can continue to just leave it at 11.7 million and just carry on, because we need to start, you know, we've had this discussion every year since I've been here.
Okay, and so for clarification, I was under the impression that what you had said earlier was that we need to maintain, at least maintain, and not, you know, so we're still back to how much does the board want as far as out of our discretionary revenue that we want to apply towards this debt, and how far do we want to go and make that a priority?
Yeah, so we're not losing any ground, but this strategy that we just talked about here would only mean that we would be status quo. So not that we're going to have that discussion today, but I think that's what needs to then be on the table, is to what degree are we going to, last year I think we only paid $200,000, but as you see, that didn't account for the $500,000 in interest, so we really lost ground.
Right, but here's the problem in itself. The reason why you didn't hear about any of the teeter plan and how we were trying to, because as we go along in our budget process, we don't know what our revenues are till the very end. So as the priorities kept coming up through the departments, through the budget conferences, and we were hearing all of these different priorities that needed to be met at their department level need, our upfront cost to the teeter plan, as far as what we had anticipated, we started out at $2.5 million general fund contribution, and it ratcheted down to 200. That's what happens. So it's really hard at the very beginning of this process to try to determine how much general fund you're going to pay on the teeter when you don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah, that's clear, but I think we need to do a better job than we have in the past, and that's one of the reasons I voted no in the budget, because I thought 200,000 was not enough. I felt we needed to get to at least 1 million out of an 11 million debt.
Okay, Allison, is there anything else we need to wrap this up?
Okay, well, I guess you can all decide when you want to have the discussion about board involvement in the budget and setting priorities and the framework for all of that. And if you ask us, we could schedule the discussion in little bite-sized pieces and put some on March 17th and some on the other, or you could decide this is the end of the discussion. You decide where you want to go with this. I guess I'd go back, though, to the what makes a priority and the working definitions. I think where this comes in, and maybe I have to explain it wasn't meant to be a euphemism, but on B and C, it says funding priority programs first at current levels and cutting other programs to fit remaining funding. And then the C says the same thing, cutting other programs to fit remaining funding. So what that means is your priority such a priority that you're willing to lay off staff in other programs in order to meet it? So if you want to kind of use that as a benchmark as you're looking at that, that's what it would be. And I think the discussion that we had in the executive office, and possibly it was not as explicit as it needed to be in front of the board last year, was, is this something that you would lay off staff for? And the thinking process that we went through was, at least at the beginning stages, the teeter payment was not one of those things. That is a board decision ultimately, and I think that that's why we need to know, because we'll build those in up front and then budget around whatever's left. And that's why the priorities are really important, and that's why it would be useful for you to have the discussion at some point.
Supervisor Brown?
I think it's extremely important to start now. And our very next meeting is a good place to start. Maybe we have to increase board workshops, but the time is now with the task that we're going to be facing for the coming year. And Jennifer, you asked about public safety. That is a priority of mine, but I also have to see just exactly what I asked for, and that's programs, whether they're mandated or not, what those funding levels are. We're going to be looking under chairs, no cleaning of carpets. I mean, I think it's going to be really brutal, but we do have an opportunity. We do have an opportunity here.
I respect that, Supervisor Brown, but and we will provide you as much information, but time is of the essence to some degree to get a balanced budget, and so I kind of go back to, we have budget instructions on the 11th, and we will bring that information to you as part of our informational package to the board as part of the CEO's recommended budget, or we can bring it next week if that's what you want. But it doesn't help us with our priorities. And in other words, in the budget instructions, we hand out to the departments whether or not we're going to do a 6% cut, a 10% cut. We make them go back, build their budgets based on what our instructions are. And if we don't have those priorities up front, we can't give them that number. That's it. That's bottom line.
We've done this in the past. You give it department's budget instruction, come back with a 5% cut, 6%. I really think that we need to, in this board, is basically, in my opinion, give this direction that we need to be based upon, non-mandated functions to start with. I mean,
and we can certainly say that.
Why cut a mandated function by 6% and a non-mandated function by 6%? Don't do any cutting in the mandated functions and let the non-mandated functions slide off the table. That's my feeling of that. It's come to that. I mean, I think that's the first thing that you have to ask your departments. Offer up what is not mandated. What do you don't really have to do in this department? I think that's the good place. I like to see that's where the CEO's office start with their directions departments.
That's a good point.
Supervisor McCown.
Thank you. On option B for the funding priority programs, first at current levels, is that the current level of dollar cost or the dollar cost to fund at the current level of operation?
You pick. It could be current budgeted level, it could be current actual level, and it could be actual updated for for increases in cost of doing business. And we can do it any of those ways. I think if you're looking for no cuts in a particular area, then the direction would be current expenditures adjusted for cost of doing business. The only thing I would say is in putting that out, you then have removed any incentive for a department to try and, maintain costs this year, so.
And given the level of the projected deficit for next year, it would certainly send a different message if we said, even for those who are priority departments, that they have to live within this year's actual, for instance.
Yeah, and that's more or less what we tried to do this last year. But assuming our revenue projections we're going into it, with our eyes wide open because of, the last several months' history, then hopefully it'll be a more accurate target.
Well, I have no problem identifying public safety, specifically the sheriff's office, as a top priority. And I would like to see them at least be funded at the current level. I'll toss that out for starters.
How do you find it? How do you define current level?
08, 09 actual.
Actual or proposed?
Actual.
The actual ending budget.
What actually got spent.